there's queens everywhere. You can get a mated queen, you can get a virgin queen, you could get somebody's extra cells that they have from their splits or their OTS or whatever. Queens are not necessarily in short supply. The problem is that the demand for the types of queens that we're talking about with the Northern Queen Initiative is not necessarily high. So the individuals who are producing queens are not necessarily focused on that. Just so many things that are happening that, getting it all into a PowerPoint and then doing it within 50 minutes is probably not going to do justice, but I'm going to do the best job that I possibly can. So talk a little bit about the Northern Queen Initiative as an entity, right? And it was formed in 2023, the end of the year. And essentially there was 1 month left in the year, but there were a lot of things getting ready to happen. So we formulated a mission. And the mission for the Northern Queen Initiative was simple. As a 501c3 nonprofit, it was organized to educate and train beekeepers in queen rearing techniques and seek to improve the value and production of locally adapted survivor stock queens. Now, mission statements are really just summaries of a broader scope of things that are going on. And like I had mentioned here just a few moments ago, there's so many things that are happening, it's hard to squeeze it down into one little paragraph. We also wanted to focus on training and improving outcomes through increase by showing some of the things that we were doing or the objectives that we wanted to see happen by training others and raising up others to help do the work. So the NQI will provide education and training for interested beekeepers to raise queen bees while improving genetics. So the NQI provides all beekeepers with opportunities to participate in queen improvement through a queen rearing program. So there's various levels that individuals can participate in. The training is focused on proven techniques with access to breeding stock that thrives in northern cold climates, exhibits good honey production, possesses a calm temperament, and are mite resistant. All wonderful things, all things that obviously all beekeepers are going to be interested in, right? So let's think about what the Northern Queen Initiative really sets out to do as a project in the broader sense. The project itself is setting out to contribute to long-term solutions. All right, long-term solutions that emphasize genetics versus acaricides or dependence on acaricides. And as you heard earlier, the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild kind of emphasizes this idea as well. But it's going to be more than just talk. It's going to have to be action as well. And there are a lot of things that are going to occur to help move that ball in the right direction and move the progress forward. So the project contributes to a long-term solution that emphasizes genetics versus dependence on acaricides. And you could say that, but if you don't come up with a solution, it is just talk. Even with widespread acaricide use, national colony loss rates in the United States have increased to 52% annually, and even higher in some other years. And if anybody here is following the news that's currently circulating regarding the commercial beekeepers in the almond pollination and the large die-offs that have been occurring since last year, the industry is taking a pretty significant hit as far as that is concerned. So as far as progress with reducing losses, we've not really had a whole lot of movement for the positive there. Things seem to appear to get worse when you look at it in that scope and in that scale. So let's take this as an example. If a single operation, just one operation with 100 colonies, suffers the national average loss, as we said, we're going to say 52% last year. One operation suffers 52% loss at 100 colonies. If they have to replace those colonies, let's say they have all of their equipment, they have the frames and the comb still, they're just using packages at $149 each per package of bees. And then let's throw in some acaricides or some chemical treatments that you're going to use for those hives for the year. You're looking at approximately $8,320 worth of replacement costs right there, just on 52 colonies. Now, the potential revenue loss on products of the hive. Now, things that, let's say, wax, additional packages when you come back from the almonds, queens that may be produced, splits, those sorts of things that come off of these hives you're looking at upwards to $60,000 annually. And this is just 100 colonies, 100 colonies. Now imagine that by the thousands. So the potential loss through widespread acaricide use, we're using treatments, but we're still experiencing these losses. We're still experiencing these significant negative deficits in our outcomes, exceeds the $60,000 annual cost, no matter what. And this is across all scales. So I got to warn you, there's some assumptions here. There's some assumptions on the solution. The assumptions, by and large, are a result of looking at what we currently have in our industry and as beekeepers as a whole. Again, all scales, mostly hobbyists and sideliners, but looking at all the options that we currently have available to us, what are some solutions that can move us forward, that can help reduce some of these, problems? We're not really seeing too many of these manifest themselves. So broader solutions for stock availability are an unfilled critical need. Honeybee queens that reduce mite loads via genetic-based mechanisms improve overwintering success and reduce dependence on acaricides. Now, again, like I said, this is an assumption, but this is also somewhat fact, and you can back this up with scientific data. We don't have a lot of time to spend on giving you all the evidences that support why we're saying what we're saying here. But if you're a Googler or you're into going to Google Scholar, or you're part of the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild, you'll know that there's a lot of evidence that supports these facts, or excuse me, these assumptions. We're going to assume these are assumptions at the moment. So again, broader solutions for stock availability are an unfilled critical need. There's just not a lot of options for these mite-resistant queens. You can find them in magazines, maybe somebody around you says that they have some, but are they actually what they say they are? So the other assumption that the Northern Queen Initiative has is that better adapted bees increase survivability and increase sustainability. Queen producers of mite-resistant honeybee queens generate a revenue, right? There's money involved to sustain production of their operations while producing a sustainable solution to customers. So the cost of raising queens is already something a bit of a tricky situation. There's not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to producing a queen and then selling the queen, and all of the things that are involved in the marketing, the selecting, the testing, all those things incur labor costs. Now imagine that on a larger scale as a commercial producer or somebody that was involved in the process at a larger scale. The margins are tight. So you don't have a lot of time to do some of the things that are required to select better queens, mite-resistant stocks, because there is a lot of work that's involved. And we're going to talk about that too. So this project, like I said, I mentioned earlier, the training. This project will train and educate beekeepers to integrate resistant stock into their operations. So as regional availability increases, market availability and adoption of the genetics, adoption of the genetics will result in more genetically sustainable mating areas for all. So the project will focus on promoting broader participation of all beekeepers to increase resistant genetics and breeding populations. And so what do I mean by that? Well, the more people that are doing it, the more drones that are going to be in areas where beekeepers are placing hives and colonies and have queens that are mating. And the more available the genetics, the preferable genetics are, the more likely you're going to have positive outcomes, even if you're not participating in a project or cooperative like this. So the more people that are doing it, the more benefit there is to others. All right, so back to the question at hand. The question is, where are these mite-resistant queens? Where are they available at? If you go and ask your neighbor, or you find someone that's nearby, or another beekeeper is producing varroa sensitive hygiene or selecting for SMR, suppressed mite reproduction, somebody who says that they have mite resistant stock, maybe it's a treatment-free beekeeper who says they've got survivor colonies that they've never had to treat, and they're raising queens off of that stock. Where are these queens at, and how can you validate or verify that these queens are going to be of use to you? So this is an ongoing question that we're trying to answer with the Northern Queen Initiative. Now, specifically for Michigan, Michigan beekeepers depend on importation of honeybee queens from non-northern suppliers and breeders that raise queens and bees that are not adapted to northern climates. Beekeepers in Michigan start making splits in early May, sometimes late April, depending on our weather, in the southern lower peninsula. And when we start making those splits, we're ordering queens from out of state that are not from our area, not from our region. And they're also coming from larger scale producers, and they may not be of the kind of quality that we're looking for. But they're a necessity. They're a product that we need in order to prevent swarming, because we're splitting, but also to increase honey yields. So you have to have queens to make these splits, and you can't necessarily depend on the drones that early in the season. So you can't necessarily have high success rates when it comes to raising your own queens. So along with the challenge of, along with the challenge of environmental stress diseases harbored by the varroa mite that plague beekeepers in hobbyist, sideline, and commercial capacities, our seasonal honey harvests are impacted as well. So when we're dependent on these imported queens, we're also kind of hamstrung by the fact that these are not resistant stock, and that these potential susceptible stocks are going to increase our risk as far as mite and disease susceptibility is concerned. So I want to, again, kind of review a couple of points here. So there's a deficiency in locally adapted mite-resistant honeybee queens. This compounds the issue for beekeepers on all scales, whether you have one hive or you have 10,000. The availability of locally adapted mite-resistant stocks. There's queens everywhere. You can get a mated queen, you can get a virgin queen, you could get somebody's extra cells that they have from their splits or their OTS or whatever. Queens are not necessarily in short supply. The problem is that the demand for the types of queens that we're talking about with the Northern Queen Initiative is not necessarily high. So the individuals who are producing queens are not necessarily focused on that. So how do we reverse that? And that's another goal or an outcome of the Northern Queen Initiative. So the agricultural industry, by and large, is dependent on honeybees for sustainability in all facets of the food system. So we can't just knock the commercials and say, you failed us, and the commercial queen producers, they failed us. We can't say that it's their fault in particular. We can't really blame anyone. The demand is not there, so therefore the product is not going to be there as well. If the demand goes up and we demand, you know, these queens, we might see more production. But at the other side, now, maybe those larger scale producers would use stock if it was more readily available. So how can we create a more stable system? So we know that large operations can't dedicate the time and resources to the process required for selective breeding and honeybees. We can't really dive into what that process looks like, but if you're familiar with, you know, selecting for mite resistance, you know that there's a labor cost. So this project seeks to improve market availability and access to sustainable honeybee queens while incentivizing adoption of stock by reducing time and labor costs associated with the adoption. The project will increase production of queens for all beekeeping operations by developing a network of capable queen producers. This project will directly and indirectly influence regional honeybee mating areas that benefit all beekeepers regardless of scale. This is what it looks like when I say this, right? That last point is a bit of a crazy point, that, you know, we're going to be able to influence or increase the amount of people that are involved. And I usually feel like that last point seems pretty crazy. So how in the world can just a few beekeepers influence breeding populations? Surely one person with just a few colonies is not going to be effective. I disagree with that, and the Northern Queen Initiative disagrees with that as well. And although it seems like it's crazy on the surface, it actually is not that crazy. And if you look at the scale or the map here, the feedback loops that we have, this is kind of an idea of how the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild has been a major partner with the Northern Queen Initiative, but also what it looks like as far as the Northern Queen Initiative's interactions look like as well. And we won't spend a lot of time on this, but if anybody wanted to, you know, discuss this or grab a screenshot of that, you're more than welcome to. But there's these feedback loops, and there's all these little pieces that are connected. And so the Northern Queen Initiative is working with all of these different entities, and the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild is working with these other entities, and everybody's kind of working together. maybe not always getting along, but working together, right? And there's discussion about what's needed, but there's always consistency in the stock production, and there's always some level of measurement of that stock. So you're not just using any stock, you're using specific stocks. I still feel like this when I try to explain this to people, and I wish I could really just dive into it, but I'm going to wear the tinfoil hat for today. So in May, queen production for beekeepers begins, especially in Michigan. And the beekeepers in the project, in the Northern Queen Initiative, will begin preparation of cell builder colonies to raise honeybee queens during the time. So we have this outline, these objectives. This is what the participants of the Northern Queen Initiative are doing. On a base, now this is, just a minimum. It's not necessarily hard and fast. Everybody's got different circumstances, based on their schedules and their arrangements, but 2 to 5 colonies will be allocated to the task. Cell builders will produce queens from full-size colonies. They have an expectancy of production through 3 cycles or 21 days, producing a minimum of 40 queens per cycle. So again, some will produce 40, some will produce 60, some might produce 10, but the idea is that we're looking for a minimum production from each producer in order to meet the needs of the demand that's being created. So as one builder finishes, a new one is started, and this continues for 3 months as weather permits, with the target end date of August 1st. Sometimes you can push queen production into August, maybe a couple weeks beyond, but typically we're tapering off and people aren't making splits anymore or needing queens, at least to increase their own apiary sizes. So at the end of August, the production is estimated to turn down. Excuse me. Now, beekeepers are supposed to use queens from local stock that they're selecting from breeding candidates of the project, or selected from third-party sources of stock that's previously selected for mite resistance. So what does that mean? Well, if you're a new beekeeper and you join the Northern Queen Initiative, I'm not a new beekeeper, a new queen rearer producer, and you don't have any mite resistant stock already, how do you take the curve off, or how do you take the edge off of your breeding program? Well, you bring in something that's been tested or vetted, or maybe there's queens that are available within the initiative already to start your program with. And so those queens have already met the criteria of the selection protocols that have been set out by the Northern Queen Initiative. And so when you take that queen and you're producing queens from that stock, you've already got the ball in motion. You already have those criteria met, and the queens that you're producing can be assumed, at least to a part, to be replicating the standards that are set forward in our selection criteria. The queens are produced from starter colonies, and then they're incubated and raised until they emerge. Then they're marked. Now, we mark our virgins, and the reason that we mark our virgins is if you purchase a virgin from the Northern Queen Initiative or one of the producers in the initiative, we want you to know that the genetics you purchased came back mated in your colony, and you can verify that because she is marked. If she was not marked, or you find a queen that's not marked, guess what? It's probably a safe assumption that that's not the queen. Or the beekeeper who produced the queen used a bad marker or was a poor marking, and that happens. But for the most part, you can only control certain aspects of the process, and we try our best to make sure that you know which queen you're getting back. So then they're placed into cages and prepared for sale or distribution to customers via options provided through our single web portal. The web portal is representative of the project co-op, so the Northern Queen Initiative, and we can record customer data for follow-up and feedback loops on success rates and recruitment for program objectives in the future. So we'll talk a little bit more about the portal here in a second, but what we mean by record data is we just simply can send you a survey, or you could provide us with an email or a phone number. We could follow up with you and see how things went. Maybe the queens that we sent you were awful and you just want to chew our ear off, or you're really pleased with the outcomes and you want to know how you can participate or how you can get more. Those feedback loops are important. The program can't improve itself, or we can't improve the program if we don't have the feedback from the people who are the end result of the initiative. So how are we doing it? So the beekeepers will use scientific measurements known as assays. Stock selected from beekeeper apiaries will develop through the first year of the project, which was the most recent year. So we're discussing, this is a bit of a summary. And this will hopefully, result in a locally adapted queen in their own apiary from their own stocks that they can use as a breeder candidate in the following year. Now, if there are none that are identified, maybe it's only let's say if you know the Harbo scale we're talking about, it's a 3, which is pretty good, and a 4 is really good. If it's only a 3, you still have had some nominal success and you've selected some stock from within your own apiary, thus have a locally adapted or a locally mated queen that you can continue to select from, which is the idea, right? We want to reduce our dependence on importation. We're not eliminating importation because we need to help reduce the timeline because we're trying to move this ball fast. So we're reducing the timeline by bringing in a vetted stock from outside producers, hopefully more northernly or maybe more local, but the idea is to get that stock in there and start adding those genetics to your local apiary. A measurable reduction in the dependence on our importation of selective stock among customers and project cooperators will be achieved and increase the availability of northern selected breeder candidates. So let's say in 2 years, 3 years, we can look back and say we don't have to import anymore. We don't have to depend on outside sources. We are sufficiently selecting from within our own apiaries. Not all beekeepers participating in the process will be at the same intervals at the same time. This is not something that everybody's going to be just moving lock, stock, and in step with each other. Some are going to be making progress. Some may regress because, as you know, with beekeeping, there's so many variables. You could have higher losses one year versus other years. And maybe you got sick and you weren't able to raise queens. But the point is the cooperative is working together and supporting each other. There's enough queen production that's occurring. So if somebody's short or deficient on an order for queens, somebody else is able to help provide those. So like I said, there'll be a measurable reduction. Doesn't mean there'll be perfection. Just we'll be able to see that there's a reduction in this outside dependence. Now, the Harbo assay is the method that will be used to determine how well the honeybee suppress reproduction of mites and honeybee offspring. Are there other options to determine resistance and select for resistance? Yes. Harbo assay is not the only one on the market. It's not the only one that's available. This is the one that we've selected for the initiative. This is the one that we're currently using. So, members of the project will participate in actional educational outreach efforts. So it's not just all about queen production. Beekeepers are available to provide demonstration of their results and give presentations concerning the project through virtual monthly meetings at the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild or in-person events for regional bee clubs and organizations. Like you all here are doing now, we're doing a virtual presentation on the progress. The project aims to host 1 to 2 classes for attendees so that they can learn how to conduct and teach others the Harbo assay with hands-on learning opportunities and stock from the project colonies. So we can bring stock from the colonies that have already been selected. Let's say it's Michigan stock to a Michigan club that's hosting an event. They're going to get some of those Michigan genetics and then so on and so forth. And we continue to repeat this process where everybody is doing this. And this goes all the way back to the beginning where I said that there's a hope and a dream that's just probably never going to happen in my lifetime, or maybe it will, but everybody will be participating and the drones in Michigan will be wonderful, right? Or maybe in Nebraska or wherever in these projects may find similar application of the efforts we're talking about. So the project's outreach and demonstration will seek to provide access at all intervals of technicality that any level of education and experience in beekeeping can duplicate, and then be able to employ that to improve your own sustainable outcomes for individual beekeepers and the systems that you're participating in. Maybe you don't know how to rear queens or graft in the traditional sense, but maybe you know how to make a split or a walkaway split. And you're really good at OTS and Mel Disselkin's on the spot queen rearing. You can start with our stock and still produce queens in that fashion. And so you don't have to be a perfectionist. You don't have to be a grafter or an inseminator. You can produce queens in so many various ways. So another progression of the effort is that we've had these in-person classes, one in Dryden and the other one in Dowagiac County, Decatur. I think that's the name of the town. Niles, one of those towns. It was on the west side of the state. We did a class there.
Niles.
And so, what's that, Brad?
It was in Niles, Cass
Okay,
County.
yeah. See, it came to me, right? So we had the class in now. So individuals had access to not only a queen rearing educational opportunity, but discussion on selection. Sometimes you got to get the basics out of the way, and if you're just not proficient at it, you could still import stock from a Michigan producer because there's somebody in Michigan raising these locally mite-resistant queens. And you could start your process by bringing those in, making splits, and continuing to use those genetics in your own apiary. Now, let's say that you're in the UP or you're in northern Michigan, way up in the tip of the mitt, as we say, and you're not able to get down to one of the classes in the southern lower. Well, there's opportunities for everybody to participate in a lot of the educational opportunities that have been a production of the SBGMI and the Northern Queen Initiative. So the introduction to beekeeping class, a VSH bee breeding and assay class, and queen rearing video classes that have an opportunity for you to test your knowledge with tests and quizzes regarding videos and interactive lessons that you can do for free. If you're already an SBGMI member, great. If not, great. You could go on there and you can participate in these things for free. Is it the same as learning hands-on? For some people, it might not be. For some people, they don't have to learn hands-on. They can learn from the videos. They can participate in that process, but you're going to get a good bulk of the information you need to be well on your way in doing some of these things. And so this is another aspect of the Northern Queen Initiative's efforts and mission. If you want to track your progress, there is an opportunity for you to sign up for a free e-learning profile. You have to have a login to track your progress and get your certificates, and there's instructions on the website when you go there to SBGMI and the e-learning tab. All right, so I promised you, I said I would talk a little bit about the Queen Portal. So the Queen Portal is what I call a clearinghouse. So the clearinghouse is a place where beekeepers have access to sell their queens. Now, you can sell queens on Facebook, or you could sell them through your website. You can sell them through in person, the Queen Club. You got a lot of opportunities to purchase queens. But the reason that the Queen Portal exists is because not everybody that produces queens has access or the reach, I guess you could say, that the Queen Portal does. And the Queen Portal is going to give participants in the process the opportunity to reach an audience they might not otherwise have access to, because we emphasize shipping. Now, we're not just shipping all across the nation. We're shipping to northern Michigan, or we're shipping to Wisconsin or Ohio, and we're focusing on northern climates. But if you have a need for queens and you're in California and you would like to purchase them, that's fine. You're not excluded. Just because the name says northern doesn't mean you can't share the stock that we're producing. We're emphasizing a northern local adaptation, but that doesn't mean those queens are necessarily going to be completely inhospitable in your circumstances. The point is that you can gain access to a broader range of individuals through the Northern Queen Initiative and the Queen Portal. Now, how does that work? So if you're a part of the Queen Initiative and you're producing queens, I'm going to focus here on Decatur Ridge on the far left of the screen here. And Decatur Ridge is Brad Cloutier's apiary. And let's say he is doing local pickup. So that's the other beautiful thing about this Queen Portal, is that you can look at an area in the state and see how close or how far you are from one of these local entities, and you can drive within an hour to pick up mite-resistant stock. So we're focusing again on reducing that lack of local availability. But maybe it's a 2-hour drive and you would rather pay the overnight shipping, and you're okay with that. I know I would be in some instances, especially if I have a busy work schedule on a particular week, but I would like to get some queens. So you can access one of these bee breeders and you can get queens through these different portals. And each one of these options have the types of queens that they're offering. Some of them are maybe from the USDA poll line, or something that's locally raised. Dave Rex and Rex Apiary may have mite maulers if that's your thing, and those are available through him, but they'll be listed under each one of those. And each individual that's participating in the Queen Portal, or as I call it, the clearinghouse, there is an exchange that occurs. That individual sells their queens, and then they receive the compensation of their queens. It's that simple. It's a transaction that occurs through the website. They get paid out for the transaction of their queens. They don't have to have a website. They don't have to know how to build one. They're benefiting right there. Now, if you look at the far right side of the screen, you'll see Kobe apiaries in Grand Rapids. Okay, he also provides local pickup and shipping. Sometimes there's shipping options, sometimes they're not. It will be listed as to whether or not one of the providers are shipping, but Kobe apiary ships. You can visit the website. So this is an example where a beekeeper may not be participating in the portal process because they have their own web entity. You can go to their website directly. They're just listed here with a link that just puts you over into their store. It's pretty simple. It removes the Queen portal out of the process, but we still have a way to continue these feedback loops, and we're able to kind of understand what the needs are, where the demands are, that sort of thing, so we can continue to meet those. So basically, this is a practical idea, okay? So the initiative itself aims to improve the market availability of selected honeybee queen stocks with an emphasis on mite resistance and northern climate sustainability, or survivability, I'm sorry. We look to establish a network of production for selected stock to improve Michigan honeybee mating areas and develop a sustainable reservoir of selected stocks. So we want to be able to have something that's lasting for a while. It's not just, here 1 minute and gone the next. It's not a get-rich Ponzi scheme. It's something that has endurance. And the people that are participating in this and then others that are coming into the process are getting motivated, and we're sustaining this through bee clubs and other local participants, and even other regions. And many other states are already consulting with us and trying to replicate some of our successes, which is a wonderful thing. It's really great. We want to provide local regional access to queen stocks through local pickup from producers, bee clubs, and overnight mailing. So again, the locations of the individuals that are participating is a wonderful happenstance, but also by design. So individuals that are within an area are at least within an hour to an hour and a half of most major population centers where you're going to find a larger, consistency of beekeepers. There's more beekeepers in an area, and that helps make it more accessible. But that's where the shipping side kind of picks up the slack. Maybe you're not in an area that's close to a major population center and you're out in a more rural setting. And you can't just drive an hour to the grocery store. It really is a hassle. You have to think these things through. You can schedule an order for overnight delivery. We also aim to recruit additional queen producers to amplify project objectives and methods and improve regional saturation of viable honeybee queen stocks. And I keep emphasizing that point because it's one of the most important. The more people that are doing this, the more likelihood of sustained success that we're going to have as a whole, not just in the industry, but local beekeepers as well. We also want to breed lineages that are established as northern queens, producing offspring selected for mite and bioresistance, northern winter survivability, and honey production. This may vary a little bit across the particular individuals that are selecting, but the broader sense is these are the main criteria that we're selecting for. Me as an individual, when I produce queens, I'm focusing first on mite resistance. I might be able to handle a little bit of a saucier type queen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the queen that I'm going to be producing for others. We want to make sure that they have a gentle temperament. We want to make sure that the mating yards have gentle temperaments and that are tolerable. They're not chasing you and running you off. So we are paying attention to that. Even though, like I said, it doesn't bother me too terribly. If anybody's seen any of the videos of me keeping bees, you will know. So again, the NQI will focus its efforts on retention of heritable and preferred traits in the honeybee queens. We will utilize scientific assays and methods as well as education on the use of proven methods to identify hygienic traits. And when I say hygienic, that also includes resistance, and we can have a whole talk about the terminology there. The grading criteria that novice, intermediate, and advanced beekeepers can deploy. So we're not just reserving this for just, somebody who's got 50 years of knowledge and has been producing queens for however long. There's an access point in this whole process for anybody who's keeping bees, even somebody who's just starting this year. Harbo assays and low mite wash consistency across counties being selected for future breeding efforts. So that is the emphasis, the basic foundation of the selection protocols. All right, Who is the NQI? So if you're not familiar with the state of Michigan, many of you may be from Michigan, but for those that are not and are here to learn about what we're doing, this is the great state of Michigan. And in here, you'll see that there's this blue square that's, kind of drawn out. These are some freeways, actually major freeways in the lower portion of the state. In the bottom right corner, you have Romulus, which is about 15 minutes from Detroit proper. And just north of that, you have Fenton, which is an hour and a half, maybe about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, maybe from Romulus. And then to the west, you have Grand Rapids, which is the northwestern lower middle. And then you have Decatur down in the lower southwestern portion. And so again, major population centers can be found pretty close to most of these areas and within an hour. So it is an effort that's initiated through the SBGMI. So there's some is the word I'm looking for, synonymity. They're kind of synonymous in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, they are two separate entities. It was soft launched in 2023, so this is not the first year of the effort, 2024, and then this upcoming year. We did a pilot program and we evaluated whether or not this was actually something that was viable. And so there was production of queens, and there was a portal, and there was discussion, and there were feedback loops. And a result of those feedback loops is kind of what you're seeing here today. So the 4 queen producers with multiple queen pickup locations in Michigan and primarily located in the southern portion of the state. So I talked about Kobe apiaries. This is Matt and Megan Kobe, and they are responsible for production of honeybee queens and outreach in the western portion of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. And again, the criteria is to maintain 2 to 5 honeybee colonies for the project, provide weekly inspections for health and status, and provide updates to the project coordinator. So we're getting into the aspects of our SARE grant. And the SARE grant is facilitated by what they call an ag professional. The ag professional kind of supervises the activities and makes sure that the project outcomes are developing accordingly. We look for updates on a bi-weekly basis, and Matt in particular is responsible for overnight shipping of queens to customers that are unable to secure them by local pickup. In Fenton, we have David and Karen Rex. Now, this is Livingston County. Rex apiaries. David is responsible for production of honeybee queens and outreach in Fenton. So this is on the eastern side of the state. And again, he has the similar requirements. He has 2 to 5 honeybee colonies that are maintained for the project. If he wants to maintain 20, he can, but we're looking at 2 to 5 for queen production. And he also provides updates to the ag professional on a bi-weekly basis. Excuse me. His production efforts are focused primarily on reaching people in the middle portion of the state. Mid-state population of beekeepers because of Fenton's proximity to Lansing, Saginaw, other areas some of you may not know, but the mid portion of the Mitten. Then we have Bradley Cloutier in the southwestern portion of the state in Dowagiac County. Brad is responsible for production of honeybee queens and outreach coordination with myself in the southwestern Michigan region. He also will maintain 2 to 5 colonies for the purposes of the project, in which there'll be, again, reporting of progress and discussion of progress throughout the course of his season. And then there's this guy, James Lee. He's in Wayne County, which is where Detroit is located, if you're familiar with Detroit. I am responsible for the coordination of the project. I will provide media, web outreach expertise, administer web portal, and the central clearinghouse for the beekeepers and the database for feedback and management. So there's fiscal oversight of the project expenses and purchases. Beekeepers are provided with some incentive here. Now, it's not just about just make us some queens and sell them. There's some interesting aspects of this project that we hope to reduce the expense of that. So we're going to talk about that too. So what is the benefit to beekeepers? The benefit to beekeepers is shorten the curve for selection, hobbyists, and sideline operations. You can improve your mite-resistant selection protocols in your own apiaries because you're able to purchase them in a more locally approached you can get queens locally. You don't have to worry about shipping them in. You can increase market production of resistant stocks to feed a broader market. We're going to reduce, discourage, and eliminate the chemical treadmill for beekeepers. Mite-resistant stocks reduce chemical dependence, and sometimes in cases where they are extremely mite-resistant, eliminate the need for chemicals altogether. And you're reducing your expense on the chemical, but you're also reducing the stress on your bees and the chemicals in your hive, or just the sheer aspect of having to deal with chemicals in general, the protective equipment that you got to use. A lot of things are kind of reduced or eliminated altogether. We also want to shed the stigma of treatment-free or treatment-reduced beekeeping paradigms. There's been a lot of concern in the past with people who are taking the approach of reducing their treatments or engaging in what's called treatment-free beekeeping. We're looking for a way where you can validate what it is that you're doing, and you can quantify what you're doing because you're monitoring. You know that your mites are reduced because you're looking. You're also using resistant stock, and you're not necessarily just that quote unquote lazy beekeeper, as folks seem to gravitate toward identifying someone who may be focused on reducing their dependence on chemical treatments. And again, we're going to increase monitoring and beekeeping operations so we can identify local stocks. All right, so in 2023, we applied for a grant from North Central SARE and the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Project. And it was a partnership grant. And the partnership grant, obviously outlined previously here in this discussion, involves 4 individuals who are participating together in these efforts that I've outlined for you tonight. You can look up the efforts here on the website, which is listed at the bottom left. It's Project ONC 24153. And there is an outline of the project. And we were provided with some grant monies for the project. We also received some incentives and some grant funding from other entities as well. So in 2023, we were given the Bee Practical Award from the American Beekeeping Federation. It was a $500 check. You know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's something to help incentivize what we were doing and to help get us started. And that also provided some financial assistance with the project. So you can't just take off and run with something like this scope and this scale with a hope and a prayer. Although at first, I think most of it was hope and prayer. And then in 2024, we also received a $2,000 travel grant to the American Beekeeping Federation Conference in Louisiana from the One Hive Foundation. And this was focused on policy development and science research for beekeeping. So there's a big aspect of what we're doing that involves scientific research, scientific application, and also how can we advocate on a larger scale and improve these processes for all beekeepers. So there was a grant provided for that. And as I referred to the SARE grant for $50,000, this is a 2-year project. We're wrapping up year 1. We're going to be reporting on year 1's progress here March 1st. It's $50,000 over the course of 2 years, and it is a reimbursable grant. Now, the Northern Queen Initiative wasn't just handed a $50,000 check. As an entity, there was no money to run the program. Everything is paid for after you make your expense. So we spend the money, and then we seek the reimbursement from North Central SARE. A lot of our support comes from the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild of Michigan, as well as donors to the project, Northern Queen Initiative's charitable donors, and which we're extremely grateful for everybody who has shown not only support and merit and moral support, but also financially. And other bee clubs and people who are talking about what we're doing and people who are purchasing the queens and supporting our queen producers. It is just a really wonderful thing. And it's an exciting thing because it's validating what we're doing, which seems like it's futile. And one of the reasons that projects like this have a hard time is because it's so much work. But once you can start getting the results out in front of people and you can start verifying and validating that, people start to support it. And we're seeing the fruit of that, and we're really happy for it. We're happy for everybody that's here tonight. In 2024, now this is another aspect that kind of was born out from the pilot program. We don't have queens to produce at the beginning of May initially from our own stock, and we shared that This is a practice in Michigan that's challenging, especially when the early season starts and it's time to split, prevent swarms, and to keep your colonies intact so that you can run for honey. Well, we brought in virgin VSH queens from Stevens Bee Co. and we distributed them through group order pickups at our locations where our queen breeders are, but also a couple of other individuals throughout the state who serve as a pickup point for others to come to. So you save on your shipping because the effort compensates the shipping. And all you're doing is participating in a group order, and you're getting queens that are mite resistant. They're verified and vetted from a known producer who is testing and who you can assume will have a high level of mite resistance in the stock. So this is a way for us to start cutting that curve of progress. Now, again, it's importation, but it's not necessarily our sole effort. So there's going to be a mix. But as we gradually increase our ability to select our own stocks, we reduce our dependence on importation in those early seasons. Maybe we have somebody who's providing us stock from our own stuff in the fall or in the spring that's located in a warmer state who can get started sooner. That is another hope and a prayer, but it's not one that I think is unachievable. Now, the clearinghouse last year, from all 4 producers, managed to distribute 536 virgin VSH queens that were either raised off of local stock from a producer who had been rearing those queens, or from stock that had been tested or selected, or an instrumentally inseminated breeder based on our criteria. So all in all, 736 queens were distributed through the effort last year. I think that's huge. So what are some of the outcomes? Some of the outcomes, we've talked about this, so I might be reiterating or beating a dead horse, as you will, but we launched free online queen rearing curriculum as a prerequisite to an in-person grafting class. So in order to become a quote-unquote grafter, and potentially maybe a producer or a breeder for the Northern Queen Initiative, you have to take this class before you can come to the grafting program. You can't just show up and take the grafting class. We want people who are going to be invested in actually producing queens in this manner, so we want them to take the prerequisites before they show up. So they have some working knowledge, and we don't actually have to spend a bunch of time on those basics. We're able to be more efficient with our time and focus on the hands-on part of the process, which is great. We registered and graduated 30 plus students during those 2 sessions. And because of the grant, we were able to subsidize some of those expenditures. Participants were able to get queen rearing tools. They were able to get a queen rearing book, and provided plenty of other additional resources. And then we launched the free online VSH queen breeding Harbo assay curriculum. Again, doing the assay is it's not super hard. I hear people say that it's hard, and maybe it's because I enjoy it, but I don't think it's difficult at all. We do things that are very difficult in beekeeping, and doing an assay is it's not very difficult at all. The time investment is a little bit of a different story, but once you get proficient, you spend about 20 minutes on a colony, maybe a little less depending how quickly you're going. You may spend more if you're taking your time and talking with somebody, and maybe you waste your whole day just doing one, but that's beekeeping. The point is that you can take that class and get a good idea of where to start, and then you can start building your experience by actually doing it because you've had a little bit of a knowledge to kickstart you. So additional outcomes, all right? We want to improve attitudes. The project is improving attitudes and understanding and education toward the adoption of mite-resistant honeybee queen genetics versus the default acaricide dependence. So we want to encourage people to positively impact their honeybee colony survival in the state of Michigan and beyond. We want to be able to demonstrate measurable increase in queen production from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4. And we're able to measure this based on the distribution of queens through the central website and our clearinghouse reporting mechanisms. So we're going to translate these, hopefully, to fact sheets that can be shared with everybody else for education and information sharing based on beekeepers in the region. We want to increase the network participants, and we want to move from 4 to 8 and 8 to 16 and establish a presence of queen producers that are modeling this project in the upper and lower Michigan peninsulas using the prescribed methods of genetic assessment and selection. Now, again, it doesn't have to be just Michigan. You can apply these principles to any state in the union. or any country for that matter. If you're in Australia, these are, it's just a matter of the persons and the people and the individuals that are engaging in the processes. What I would like to see happen is an annual breeding event for beekeepers that we can establish where people are able to come and maybe receive instrumental insemination of their top selected stocks to continue a high degree of that genetic influence of northern selected stock in their region, their apiaries, and their mating areas. Is it necessary or crucial or essential to have this instrumental insemination as part of the process? Not at all. Is it a beneficial tool? Most definitely, most definitely. And also the project will have identified cooperative participants that could possibly participate in the insemination of breeder queens. Maybe somebody in the network is, willing and has the time or the ability or desire to go and take training, become equipped as a technician in Michigan to provide that service, both to the Northern Queen Initiative, but, to other beekeepers. So, testing, teaching, collaborating. That's the thrust of this. That's the gist of the whole entire Northern Queen Initiative and most of the efforts that are taking place. I haven't really even covered the whole gamut and all the things. That just is like a summary. And even then, I feel like it's more than a mouthful at just the summary level. Genetics are the future. Beekeepers are the future. Many hands make light work. I get along with a lot of people that I don't get along with. And if it's for the sake of a common goal, we can overlook a whole lot of differences, especially when it comes to management methods, maybe it's treatment methods. Who knows? Who cares? And even politics, right? We can learn to get along for the sake of the bees. And as far as sustainability is concerned, the bees have to be the primary participant in the process. We can talk about the buzzwords in beekeeping till the cows come home, but if we're not actually using something that the bees can be the primary participant in, it's not going to help us at the end of the day. Market saturation cannot be achieved by a single source. One person can raise queens, but then you have genetic bottlenecks. Again, that's another talk in and of itself. And you can find other things on the internet or on YouTube that can explain those processes and issues to you. And Dave Tarpey is a good source for that. In his lab, you could look up some of his talks online, or you can come to our winter conference for the SBGMI on the 22nd. If you're interested in helping the Northern Queen Initiative, maybe, again, you're one of those folks who are not going to graft or you're not going to make a lot of splits and you just want to buy in a couple of queens, you can help by supporting us through the purchase of queens. You can also make donations via PayPal or check. That information is online there. We're more than happy to accept charitable contributions, put them to good work for you. And anybody who donates receives email updates as the year progresses whenever we're able, and to keep people apprised of what's happening. My personal contact information, if you want to get a hold of me, is up here on the screen. Obviously, you can find most of the things that I'm involved in through the SBGMI media outlets and my personal Facebook and my personal YouTube channel and my email address. And, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors, so I want to make sure that I give thanks where they're due. SBGMI subscribing members and supporters, the NQI donors and supporters, the USDA ARS Baton Rouge Lab, the ABF, One Hive Foundation, Miller Bee Supply, wonderful supporter. A whole host of names listed here of people that have consulted or have listened to us rant about bees, listened to me rant about bees, or even contributed to the grant application. So many people have been a part of what's happening with the Northern Queen Initiative and even the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild. It may look like, that it was this wonderful idea that came together and it's unique, but really it's a collection of the wisdom of so many different beekeepers from the community, and put all those ideas together and set them in motion. And with that, that is all I got for now.
That mean you're ready for questions, James?
No, but I'll take them.
All right. So a few of them we've already answered in the chat.
Okay.
All right. So I'll start with Valerie. She asked a question, which I think is another great topic to get into. I'm not sure you'll be able to get into it in depth, but she says, are you doing anything to raise drones with the genetics you are selecting for as well?
Yeah. So my approach to drones for purposes of genetics in my apiaries is to ensure that the colonies that have the genetics I want to see are in the yard where I am mating. Do I go above and beyond to make sure that any particular colony is producing more drones than others? Not necessarily. I will drop in a blank frame, foundationless, as they say, into the brood nest for some of the breeder colonies and let them build that out and raise drones. I'm not a big fan of the green drone frames. For some reason, I'm just not really efficient at using those, and they end up filled with nectar and honey. And it's a wonderful honey frame, but I really don't want to waste money on a drone frame that's just going to turn into a capped honey frame. So, and it's really difficult to extract because it's so much heavier and it throws the extractor into a wobble. So, do I do anything specific? I just put as many colonies that have the genetics that I want in the same yard where I'm going to mate the queens. It's as simple as that.
All right. Yeah, one thing I'll add to that too is I in all my breeder colonies I put mediums in and I run deep, so the bottom of that
It's yep,
is pretty much going to be all drones. So yeah, you want to saturate, you want all your breeders to produce drones.
yep.
So good question, Valerie. Okay, here's an interesting one. And somebody did make a good suggestion on this one. I'll tell you what that is here. I thought I read that the new administration has suspended all new SARE grants until further review. So number one, I would say we're not a new SARE grant at this point. And then there was a suggestion that somebody said, make sure you're writing your congressman. And then what would you like to add to that, James?
My knowledge right now is that the suspension of grants was lifted. I think that lasted like a whole weekend, maybe. So as far as information that we're getting for as far as the grant is concerned, from the University of Minnesota, which oversees the SARE grant, there's no suspension of funds at the moment. And with this being a reimbursable grant, that could be tricky, right? We spend the money and then we can't get it back. But here's the kicker, right? Like, we're gonna do what we're gonna do, whether we got the grant or not. The grant has been a wonderful incentive to boost what we're doing, but the people that are involved in this project are invested. And that's what I think is something that maybe should have been added to the presentation. People who are invested in the effort are going to give their all because we're all seeking the same kind of thing, improving beekeeping for beekeepers with mite resistant stock. So but as far as the suspension of the money, I don't think it's an issue right now.
Laura had a follow-up on that one that should be quick to answer. Are SARE grants through the USDA?
Yeah, so the SARE grant is a sub award. So it's the USDA gives the money to, let's say in our case in North Central region, they give the money to the University of Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota is responsible for sub granting. They oversee the sub award.
All right, let's see.
Hmm.
So there was a little bit of a conversation here, not a question, but a conversation that there was some back and forth a little bit, but it's probably worth talking about real quick. Somebody asked, Jack said, you don't need queens to make a split, a walk away split, artificial swarm, removing the queen and tuber. So he goes on about the technique. At the beginning of your honey flow will give you a crop. You can split, swarm impulse, provide a brood break. He's going on and on. But I would just say the point of what we're doing though, because some of the responses we're talking about, but if you don't have a basis of mite resistant stock, how does that help? And so I think what you would say to that would be is we're providing that. That's what
Right,
we're trying to provide.
right. Yeah, and when you make those walkaways of those artificial splits and they came from a mite resistant queen, you don't need another queen. You're raising a daughter off of that resistant queen. But until your apiary and your breeding program is saturated with those positive genetic selections, you can keep making splits. But with each off cross, outcross as we call it, every time you made a new queen, you're reducing the amount of those genetics. So that's why it's important to have as many of those selected queens in all of those splits that you make, whether you bring in a queen or not. You want those You want those queens laying strong mite resistant eggs.
Okay. Let's see. Anthony asks, can you talk a little bit about the UBO hygienic bee test? I recently heard that there were some issues appearing when using it. Thank you.
There's a lot of issues that are being reported. There's a lot of successes being reported. My personal opinion is UBO is a tool to identify hygienic behavior. And if you're in a situation where you're treating your colonies and you're not ready to, quote unquote, go chemical free so that you can test your colony in the fall, you can use this as a kind of a pre-screen to determine which colonies you're willing to proceed with. So maybe you got one colony out of 10 that shows resistance and all the rest of them are terrible. That's where you would want to start breeding from your own program. You don't got to buy any queens from us at all. You could start with your own stock. You don't have to use imported stock. Most honeybee populations, from what we understand by the data, about 30% of them already have mite resistant genetics inherent to them. But if you don't select or identify them or monitor for them, you won't necessarily be able to find them. And UBO is one of those tools that can move you in that direction.
All right. Want to keep going?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, are you working with anyone in the Mid-Atlantic area? That comes from Robert.
Now, you guys want to hear something funny? Mid-Atlantic. Can you be more specific? Because I don't know where that's at.
Well, Mid-Atlantic would be North Carolina, I think,
Oh,
South Carolina, maybe Virginia,
yeah, because I think East Coast altogether. Like,
Virginia.
that to me, Atlantic is everybody over there.
So not Florida or probably Georgia, but somewhere between there and maybe New York.
Yeah, so
Ish.
we not working well. So there is a beekeeper in Virginia that we we work with in some ways, and we're looking at identifying somebody. Let's, like I said, mentioned in the presentation, it'd be nice for us to be able to send one of our breeder queens to somebody who's competent and also selecting for resistance in their own apiary. We could send them something that's been mated here locally already, and they can begin raising queens from that stock to send back to us in exchange for whatever incentive that might be. Maybe we pay them for the queens or we send them queens, vice, whatever it is, whatever the arrangement is. That way we can not be importing a non-Michigan queen, right? And this could be in any state or any region. So we're interested in that for sure. We haven't nailed that down yet. We haven't gotten to that point. That's definitely one of the goals for sure.
Okay. Um, all right. So yeah, and I would, one thing I would add to that UBO thing, UBO question is, I mean, one of the things we're finding is even with the Harbo assays, sometimes there's variation.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not been anything found that's perfect, but I think what we're trying to do is move it in the direction of that positive direction of mite resistance. And so we're just using whatever tools we have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here's a Carrie was responding on one of the other ones. Is this the basic approach that the queen mother colonies are not treated with any mite reduction chemical or actually have never been so treated? And is there a scoring system, mite counts, honey production, winter survival, etc., to assess breeder queen eligibility?
Okay, so it's the basic approach that the queen mother colonies are not treated with any mite reduction chemical. Ideally, yes, right? My breeder colonies are not treated. I don't treat my breeder colonies. I think the only way that I would treat a breeder colony would be if she was overwhelmed with mites or above a threshold that I've established. Other than that, she's already been determined to be mite resistant. I'm going to continue to monitor, her validity, obviously. What I see personally in my own apiaries is that in year 3, and I think there's some other data from other research that kind of helps support this, In year 3, it gets a little trickier as the queen gets older, and her ability to keep mites down is also a little trickier. And it could be a myriad of things. It could be age, it could be production, who knows? But as they get older, they require a little bit more attention. Is there a scoring system like mite counts, honey production, winter survival to assess the breeder queen eligibility? Yeah, so right now the primary scoring system is mite resistance, and then the other scoring criteria is the beekeeper, assesses the gentleness and obviously pays attention to their productivity. If it's a colony that's not producing a lot of honey, there's probably going to be a whole lot of other things that are going on. It's going to be pretty obvious. But my personal issue is that all bees produce honey, some more so than others. But there's a balance you got to strike a balance. Primarily, we're focusing on the mite resistance because dead bees don't make honey.
All right. Kurt asks, could you provide assistance or guidance to help our club develop our local queen marketplace complete with the feedback loop? I'd be interested in an offline conversation on the back end tech as I'm looking to do the same.
Yeah, so send me an email. Part of the SARE grant is that we offer consultation. Obviously, not all things are going to translate perfectly, but the broad point of this presentation was to kind of give people a gist of how this could look for them and their mating programs, and we'd like to see that replicate. It's more important that the success is being replicated, but at the bare bones, you just need people that are willing to do selection.
All right. Do you use virgin mite-resistant queen colonies to produce drones with favorable properties to reduce the outbreeding of favorable traits for your area?
No, I keep it simple. There's a lot of managing in that. Could I improve my personal outcomes? Yes. I can't answer for everybody else in the program. Again, the idea is just to saturate the yard with the genetics of preference as much as possible. And then that way the queens don't have to go very far to mate. Everything they need is pretty close to home.
Okay, very good. And I think you speak for all of us on that one.
Do I speak for you, Brad?
You do in this case, you do. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, in this good. I'm glad you clarified.
Yes, in this
Don't
case.
let me. Yeah.
Here's one that probably should be simple. This is probably going to be different from everybody you ask, but how are you treating your drone frames for mites? And I'm going to tell you what James is going to say. He's going to say, I don't. He loves mites. James loves mites, colonies that are riddled with mites, because he wants to find out if his colony can handle those mites.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Now, so obviously there's a caveat, right? If it's a susceptible colony and maybe they're not mite resistant and they are overrun with mites, and I have a frame that's full of drones and I go in and I check that colony, I'm like, man, this one's not doing so hot as far as resistance is concerned. Maybe they fail all the criteria. I will snatch that drone frame out of there and I will dispose of the mites that are in those drones and requeen the colony.
And would you just do that through freezing the frame or feeding your chickens or what?
I mean, you could do all of those things. The way I typically do it is I stick it in a tray and I intend to do something with it, and then I don't, and it gets sent to my garage and starts smelling. The mice get into it, and then I try to put it out for the birds or whatever, and that don't work. And then I freeze it, and then I put it back in a colony for the bees to clean up. I just get it out of the colony.
Yeah. Yep. Or if you have, one of the funny things, one of the funny caveats about this, for instance, last year I harboed a colony 3 times, and out of, I don't know, 500 or 600 cells, I never found a single mite.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that kind of throws you off because you'd rather see some and this is getting a little more technical, but you'd rather see some non-reproductive mites in there.
Right.
And so that might be one of those colonies where you take a infested frame with mites and drop it in there and see how they do at that point.
Yes.
But
Yep.
that's one way of doing it. But a lot of the problems with beekeepers is they're afraid to lose anything,
Right.
so it's a risk reward thing.
Right.
So,
Yep.
another good question here from Randy. Randy's going to hold us accountable here, James. Please clarify when a queen is purchased from one of the four producers, what assurances, documentation come with it to provide confidence of mite resistance? Are these guaranteed to be F1s from a certified Harbo 3 or 4 breeder, which has then been open mated?
All right. So let me see if I can bring it up real quick. Hold on.
You want me to send it to you?
What are you gonna send me? No, I'm gonna bring up the website. I want
Oh,
to.
okay.
Let me. Randy, that's a good question, and that question is what we want people asking. And all beekeepers should ask that question of any queen producer. The only way that producers are going to be accountable is if beekeepers are asking questions like that. Um, and one of the reasons why I raised mite resistant stock is because I got burned on something saying that it was mite resistant, and it wasn't. And I was not happy about that. So let me see if I can let me share my screen real quick here. All right. No, we don't want the PowerPoint. Get out of there. Get out of there. This page here. Okay, so when you go into the Queen portal and you go to one of the Queen producers, I'm gonna go to James Lee's Bees. I'm gonna go to the portal here and it's gonna list, there's gonna be a description of what's being offered, right? And it's gonna tell you maybe what the backstory is that kind of answers some of your questions. But then there's going to be different options for the queens that are being offered. So if you could see here, there's the VSH Harbo, the SBC Michigan, VSH Poline. And when I so like in my designation here, if it's SBC Michigan, that means that queen line originated from F1 that was purchased from Stevens Beco. And then it's going to be a daughter that was tested, or vice versa, right? And if they're out of stock, you're going to put your information here, your name or whatever. You could get notified of when that specific queen that you're looking for. So you should be able to find all the information in the description from the producer. And the same thing with off-site producers that are not using the portal. Because if I go back to the queen ordering portal, and let's say I want to order from Kobe Apiaries, it's going to take me to their website, and they're going to have descriptions of the queen that they're selling, and idea of pedigree, if you will. So it's not direct linked right now because obviously the season is out, but you'll be able to pick the queen and look at the description, and know what it is that you're purchasing, etc. So like for instance here, he tells you where the queens are grafted from and what their heritage is. So to further answer the question, what documentation? There's no certificate or seal. We can offer the assurance that the Northern Queen Initiative is only selling F1s that were raised from a queen mother that scored a 4 on the Harbo assay, or was provided by an instrumentally inseminated queen from a vetted VSH breeder, if that makes sense. F2s, if they're being sold, are not sold as queens from the initiative, but will be marked as such. So I would tell you this is a daughter of the daughter. etc. But I'm generally only selling F1s off of stock that has been tested as a 4. So you'll be able to know if it's open mated or if it's not. Randy, I hope that answered your question.
I seen a few of you have replied with questions to other thoughts or questions, and those are not always visible to me. So if you've asked something and I haven't gotten to your question, you might want to put it in the main thread here, okay? Here's another one. James, this comes from Valerie. If we ask our hives to clean up or clean out drone frames after putting them in the freezer, are we not spreading the possibility of infected drones inflicted with viruses? I believe Zach Lamas did a study on this and reported there's a good possibility of this occurring.
Yeah,
Always possible, right?
yeah, having 2 hives in an apiary is a chance of spreading viruses.
That's correct. Your chickens will not complain if you give that all to them. So we've done it before and they've been happy chickens. Um,
Oh, hold on. Randy said our prices are too cheap. Well,
well,
let me get back to that. So,
yeah, go for it.
yeah, the Queens were $20 last year. And the SARE grant is largely responsible for that low price. Yeah, obviously everybody knows this. This is not a partisan situation. Inflation is a bit of a bear, and shipping prices are up. So shipping will be increased to $65 this year for overnight shipping. We got hosed on some of it last year, and that's okay because the grant was helping subsidize. And I didn't talk a lot about the incentive aspect of the grant, but again, queen producers are incentivized through assistance with queen cups and cages and grafting supplies and that sort of thing to help reduce that cost while we build up the availability for the market. And as that improves, the price will gravitate back toward a normal market mean, if you will. So we also want to make sure that we're providing queens that are accessible to everyone. And we want there to be equity, right? You can buy a virgin queen for $20 off of anyone, but can you buy a VSH queen off of somebody for $20? That's measured and tested. So I believe we are raising the price. I don't want to say it on here because I can't remember, but maybe Brad or Matt, are you here? Can you remember? Matt, do you remember what the price was?
I don't know if it's been decided, so I just think that would be best not to say anything at this point.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it is going to go up. It's not going to go up significantly. It's not going to be outrageous, but we did have a price increase, but the shipping is definitely gone up as well. So
I think one thing to add there too, James, for people is I think all of us, at least I know 3 of us for sure, within the grant have done some virgin queen introduction testing. So we've kind of gone through what's the best procedure to, install and get a virgin queen mated and laying. And to be honest, right now, we are probably, I'd say most of us have seen about 75 to 80%, which to be honest is my experience is that it's higher than if you buy in and have queens shipped into you and you install those queens that have probably not laid for 2, 3 weeks or whatever. And so I think people have been intimidated by it. It gets a bad rap, especially amongst commercial beekeepers, but that makes sense. I don't think it's a very viable thing to do for commercial guys, but for those of us with 10, 20 colonies, man, I've got a video on my YouTube channel where, I bought a bunch of from Kobe before we started the NQI, and I think I probably had an 80% late summer acceptance rate and got many, if not most of those through the winter. So it's a very viable process. I really highly recommend you guys associate yourself with how to do that.
Yeah, and on the SBGMI website, if you go to the frequently asked questions drop down, and you look at how to you introduce a virgin queen, there is a couple of links both to Stevens Biko and Matt Colby's website where he has it listed, but it's also spelled out here. And then there's a YouTube video on on using and introducing virgins from Cory Stevens himself, but then we also produce this handy dandy little image and step breakdown of the process that you can, right click and save the image to your computer, or print it out or use it however you see fit, to help you with the process. And me personally, exclusively, I use virgin queens in my yards. So
I got one for Kobe from Bruce Kilgore. Ever consider shipping 48-hour cells? I'm not sure if he wants that one or not.
he's not going to take it.
It's not our thing. Yeah. If you want to add to that, James, feel free.
No, we're not shipping the NQI itself. So the NQI itself is using a particular process that we can consistently demonstrate, evaluate, and deliver on. Every beekeeper is welcome to do whatever he wants with his operation. But as far as the NQI is concerned, the product that we're putting forward is going to use the same criteria as is outlined in the initiative. This is the best way for us to measure outcomes, but also to test them. So it doesn't mean that somebody can't ship 48-hour cells if they want. That's up to them, but we're not necessarily going to be able to guarantee outcomes with that. And we want to make sure that, again, like a queen coming back mated with our mark on it helps you know that what you purchased from us is what you bought. It's this, like with cells, there's just too many variables.
Yeah, and you can call any virgins that come out with damaged wings, or maybe if they're too small, things like that. Here's another one. Off the top of all four of your heads, would each of you let us know what type of breeder lines each of you have available? I think you kind of covered that a little bit, or how to find that info out. Is there any specific breeder heritage lines you would like to get into the initiative?
I mean, at the end of the day, we just want them to be bees from our own apiaries. We want to reduce the dependence on importation. We want to be able to say this is a Michigan queen that's VSH, or expresses suppressed mite reproduction. I don't necessarily have any favorites or particulars that I'm after or seeking. I'm just looking. I want queens that are keeping the mites down. And I want them to be from my own apiary. And so, for me personally, I'm several years in the selection process, and a little bit ahead, not much further ahead to some of the folks in the initiative, and I'm already seeing products of the effort. So I'm seeing these colonies that are raised from my bees that are keeping mite loads down, almost to the point where testing is a challenge, because I'm doing mite washes and none of them are washing over 2%. And I like Brad mentioned, I want mites in my apiary, and it seems really bizarre to say that, right? Like, I don't have enough mites. But it's a good thing. It's a good situation to be in. Versus other yards, they're just riddled with mites. There's lots of issues, but you can see the difference between the yards that you're focusing efforts on and the yards that you're not. So it's important to raise the queens from within your apiary and reduce your dependence on external inputs.
Yeah. Is there any call for folks that buy queens to actually report mite counts? Good question, Luke.
Any call? I don't understand the question.
If somebody buys queens from us, would it be of interest to us to get
Oh, yeah.
feedback from them down the road on mite counts?
Oh, yeah, 100%. So, we haven't sent it out yet, but usually we send out a survey to people that bought queens in 24 to get that feedback and then provide that information. Yep.
Okay. So Randy asked, given that acceptance rises with time after a new queen mates, do the 4 producers agree on a minimum age for all mated queens before they're eligible for sale? And we're not selling mated queens, so we don't have an agreement. But I would say that we all agree that you shouldn't pull a queen out of a mating nuke 10 to 14 days and then sell that queen. I wait if I used to sell mated queens, and I used to wait 21 to 28 days before selling them. And then whatever your thoughts, James, on that.
No, yeah, I try to wait 21 days before I sell my mated queens. And if I sell my mated queens, I'm gonna ask a premium price because I'm usually hesitant to sell them. And typically if I am selling a mated queen, it's because she's not mite resistant, and I'm gonna make sure that you know that, and she's probably gonna be on discount. So, sometimes you just need a mated queen for your colony, and it is what it is. But I try not to do that.
Okay, so we do welcome you to give us feedback. If you buy queens from us and you want to give us feedback, it would be great to know in the spring if they're still alive, what their mite counts were, how they came through winter. That's really excellent to help us, you know, gather that info. Let's see. Temperament. I think, do you mark your virgins? I've found
Yeah, we
reduced
covered that.
mating. We've already covered that.
Yeah, well, but the issue of reduced mating, I don't. You said, yeah, you covered that. You're seeing like
Yeah.
70-75%.
And I will say this because when I started this, I pushed back on James about that. He'll remember that, I'm sure. But I will say I did not notice any reduced mating myself personally. And I didn't keep, hard data on it, but I didn't notice anything less or worse.
Right. Hmm. Yeah. Uh, I was looking for a picture.
Let's see. Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. It looks like we got quite a few. Yeah. Anybody else have anything that they want to add? Any questions, any concerns? I hope that this presentation was beneficial to you. It was not too disorganized, having had rushed it. Um, Glad to see some familiar faces. Greg Clapp, how you doing, sir? Appreciate you.
Did we sufficiently answer the question about our individual apiaries and what do we have as far as our stock goes? Before we go, did you want to, I mean, I can answer for myself if you want.
Oh yeah, I see Matt. Matt answered in the
Yeah,
chat.
you want
You
to
go
read
ahead.
that
Yeah,
or
go
do you
ahead,
want me
Brad.
to read that?
No,
Okay. Yeah,
you
so Matt replied to that question about, what's in our individual apiaries. So Matt said at Kobe Apiaries, we will have USDA pole line breeders that were sent from the USDA. We also have an II queen from Lloyd Street Bees. We also have a mutt open mated queen that scored a 4 on Harbo and washed 2 mites at the end of July. None of the breeders were treated except for the Lloyd Street breeder because we got her in August and wanted to give her nuke a clean start.
chicken.
As for me, most As for me, most of what I have, this is Brad, by the way, Decatur Ridge. Most of what I have is going to be, I would say probably 95% of what I have is going to be daughters from wildflower meadow breeders, which I'm very pleased with, and pole line. So just like Matt, we have some pole line breeders from the USDA. Yeah, we should probably clarify, as Matt did, USDA pole lines. So we still have 2 or 3, I believe, breeders from that. And then I have a good number of pole lines from last spring, well, early June, daughters that were washing like 2 or 3, or I found 1 or 2 that didn't wash anything. And so they're going through winter in nukes right now. And if they come through strong, then they'll be definitely good stock to build from, I think. So that's mostly what I have. I also do have a few fours from Stevens Beco. So they are tearing the brood up pretty good.
Yeah, and to kind of get back to that idea of somebody had asked that about treating breeders, if that's your thing, right? Like, if you need to treat, and you've already confirmed that a breeder is producing, what you need them to produce, there's nothing wrong with having to treat that colony or treating to make sure that they don't have to deal with, let's say, a mite influx from a robbing event, or maybe, um, you know, uh, a mite colony in your own apiary that crashed, or maybe a quote unquote mite bomb, if you will, impacts your breeder stock. I treat colonies in my yard that are over 5% or fail the Harbo assay, because I don't want them being a contributor to the mite load on the colonies that I've been working hard to select. So it's a kind of a concerted effort. Ideally, I don't want to treat any of the colonies. But if they're in a yard with one of the queens that I've worked very, very hard to keep, right? I want to make sure that I do what I can to preserve that colony so that I can breed from her next year and continue to reduce my dependence on other stocks or importing of stocks, because I don't have to replace dead outs.
Yeah. Matt makes a good point here too. I think that should be spoken. I think it's important to note that we are hoping to get away from specific lines such as pole line, Harbo, Stevens, etc., and just be selling F1 VSH virgins from open
Right.
mating queens that scored a 4 on Harbo and survived
Right.
without any chemical or mechanical treatments.
Right.
Part of what we're doing is trying to show everybody that this can be done in your apiary too.
Right.
So
My colonies, I've got 19 colonies that all scored 4 on the Harbo assay. I think 18 of them are still alive. I can't tell you what killed the one yet, but none of those are specific lines other than they came from my apiary. I do have some queens that were that are pole line from the USDA, and I do have some other queens that had been II'd or instrumentally inseminated. But the queens that I'm selecting for breeder stock that I'll focus on, you'll see the most queens produced from me will come from those ones that were produced in the Michigan yard and open mated.
well, James, you got some compliments here. Great attitude. Hats off to you for the hard work. Local queens, way to go. Amen to that. So anything else you want to say?
Nope. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your support. Everybody who contributed or made a contribution, either tonight or in the past. Thank you so much. You have no idea how meaningful that is to our efforts. The support is monumental, and we're going to continue to be good stewards of that. I'll also encourage you to keep doing that. I guess that would be the responsible thing to do if you're heading up a charity organization, right? Please send money. But more importantly, the best thing you can do is spread the word. Talk about the NQI, share our resources, tell your friends to buy our queens, share the queens with others. But you know what? Do an assay and then tell everybody how you learned to do the assay, and then tell us about your success with the assay. Like, that's the whole point of all this. You're making your own queens and you don't have to buy them. It's kind of an upside down model too, right? Like, work yourself out of a job, but then I'm not selling queens, even though the purpose of the grant is to help, introduce queen producers into a market where it's viable. But the more people that are doing it, the commercial operations can buy queens because there's enough of them. If there's enough commercial queens, and they come in, they lay down their hives during a migratory, transition, and they have all those favorable genetics, you're benefiting. I'm benefiting, right? That's what we want to see. We're all sharing those positive genetics. We might select ourselves into the wrong side of nature here, or maybe we select ourselves into the right side. We won't know unless we try. So that's the whole beauty of this beekeeping stuff. So yeah, thanks for your help, Brad. Thanks
Yeah.
for being on, Matt. Everybody else for your support, and have a good night.
Take care.